Hello everybody, this is Chris here. I'm back in my trusty armchair and I have a copy of my trusty collected works of Edgar Allan Poe, volume number 6, Tales, Horror and Death. Contained in this particular edition is the story that we've been looking at called the Cask of Amontillado. And over the course of the previous 2 episodes, I've given a little bit of background about Edgar Allan Poe and his life and career, about the inspiration for the story, the Cask of Amontillado, or one legend that has to do with the inspiration that Poe might have had in thinking about writing this story. And yesterday's installment, we took a look at the first part of the story, where Montresor explains his plan, or his plot, to snuff out Fortunato as a kind of retribution for an insult that he suffered at the hands of Fortunato. And today we're going to continue the action in the story. So for this episode today, I'm going to read some of the middle part of the story. And one of the things I would like to focus specifically on as we read is Poe's ability to show and demonstrate his mastery of the language. So through the character of Fortunato, and through the character of Montresor in particular, Poe is going to make use of what is called verbal irony. So in this section of the story that we're going to look at in a few moments, I'm going to pause when we come to a point where Poe, through the voice of Montresor in particular, is exhibiting his skill at this technique known as verbal irony. So in the episode from yesterday, I talked about the definition of irony as a contrast or a contradiction between what is really meant and what is actually said. So we're going to take a look at how Montresor uses this technique of verbal irony to keep Fortunato off guard, to the point where Fortunato is really leading himself into his own grave. And we're also going to focus on Montresor's character here in particular, and how much he's enjoying and getting pleasure from this game that he's playing with Fortunato. In other words, Fortunato is the mouse and Montresor is the cat. And Montresor is really playing with Fortunato like a cat plays with a mouse before the cat, finally dispatches the mouse and kills it. In a similar way, Montresor is really playing with Fortunato here until the end, where he's going to leave him to die. So we're going to dive into the story here, into the next part of the story. And I'm going to read from this text. This is the original text from the collected works of Edgar Allan Poe, as I said. So this story is so widely known and so famous that anybody can have access to it any time on the internet. All you need to do is type up the Cask of Amontillado and you'll get, free electronic books of the story that are easily accessible. And in the previous video, I was using one of those electronic texts, highlighting certain sections of the text, but I saw it for the video that I watched in review. It's a little bit hard to read that way. So if you would like to follow along, that's fine while I read. If you want to have a text in front of you while I read, I'll give you reference points to where I am in the story. You can look it up on your device while you're listening. So where we left off in the story is where Montresor has brought Fortunato back to his palazzo, and in reality it was really Fortunato that was leading the way, because Fortunato is so anxious and so desirous of testing and tasting this fantastic, Amontillado. And we have to remember that Fortunato is at this time drunk because he's been out partying with all the carousers and revelers of the carnival season, which is going on at the same time. So they go down to a bottom of this staircase, this winding staircase as it is described, a long and winding staircase. And then at the bottom of that, he comes to the catacombs. So I showed a picture of the Paris catacombs, or a couple of photographs from the Paris catacombs, just to give people a sense of what it's actually like. When he says bones piled from floor to ceiling, that's literally what you saw in the photographs. So he says here, this is again Montresor narrating the story, "The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. So that's a reference to the cap, the part of the costume that Fortunato is wearing. Of course, the jester costume, the court jester costume, this what used to be called the harlequin. He has this hat on with the bells, and the bells ring as he walks. "The pipe," said he. "It is farther armed," said I, "but observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He leaned toward me and looked into my eyes with two filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. So, again, Poe is reminding us that at this point in time, Fortunato is very drunk. And when he talks about this filmy orbs, it's like he has a blank look, a glazed sort of look in his eyes. So if you've ever seen people who are exceptionally intoxicated, they have this sort of blank look in their eyes, it's sort of glazed over. And it looks like they're not even, hardly awake. So here, Fortunato starts coughing, and then it says, "My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. 'It is nothing,' he said at last. 'Come,' I said with decision, 'we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as I once was. You are a man to be missed.'" Now, just before I turn the page, here's an example of verbal irony. When Montresor says to Fortunato, "Your health is precious." Okay? So, we talked a little bit about it yesterday while discussing the first part of the story. Montresor is playing a game with Fortunato, keeping him in the dark, so to speak. And one of the ways that he does that is through his use of language. And the use of his manner towards Fortunato. So he's always trying to keep Fortunato off guard in the sense that Fortunato believes that Montresor is honest and sincere and genuine in his feelings of friendship and warmth, and his politeness and respect for Fortunato is sincere and genuine. So when he says, something like, "My friend," and "your health is precious," it gives the impression to Fortunato that Montresor's face and his expression, his language, are all consistent with care and concern and warmth and feelings of fidelity towards Fortunato and affection for Fortunato. But we know inwardly from Montresor's original paragraph description, his smile and his satisfaction and his pleasure is at the thought of Fortunato's destruction. So obviously, Fortunato's health is not precious to Montresor because he's going to kill him. And we know that he's going to kill him. So he doesn't care, inside about Fortunato's health. But all this outward display, we talked about it in the video yesterday, up is down, down is up. Everything in this world is reversed. It's a land of confusion, so to speak. So Montresor is the one who's navigating his way through this world of confusion because he's the one pulling the strings. He's like the puppet master. He's the one pulling the strings. He's controlling Fortunato. He's controlling the situation. Everything that he's done so far to prepare for this crime has coincided with the carnival season. Everything he's done has designed so that it will go off without a hitch. He plays upon Fortunato's pride in his knowledge of wines, and he goads Fortunato into believing that this Cask of Amontillado is real and has some, reason to come with him so that he can authenticate this rare vintage. And he's going to be the one to authenticate it, nobody else. So Lucchese, no chance. So, "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come." Now, here, in this paragraph I just read, is one clue, one hint, as to why Montresor is taking his revenge on Fortunato. So, we talked about it with the word injury and the word insult, but here's another sort of small glimmer as to the reason why Montresor is taking his revenge. He says to Fortunato, again, "You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter." Now, the key word here is this, the key line is this: "You are happy as I once was." So, from that line, just that expression, we can gather some information. Obviously, Montresor is no longer happy, because he says was, obviously is in the past tense. I once was. So Montresor is no longer happy. And we can sort of make a connection here that whatever this cause of his unhappiness is sort of represented in the character of Fortunato. In other words, for whatever reason, he is targeting Fortunato as potentially being the person to blame for the fact that he's unhappy. Now, does it mean that he's lost his fortune, that he's lost his respect, that he's lost his admiration from others, that he's no longer beloved? We don't know that, but, we can stretch things only so far. All it says is, you are happy as I once was. So here's a small glimmer into the mind of Montresor, thinking about why is he taking his revenge? Well, if he looks at Fortunato as the man responsible for his loss of happiness, that could give us one possible logical motivation. Obviously, we don't know the details, but we have this clue here. So he continues, we will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Well, he is going to be responsible, of course, for not only his illness, but also his death. Besides, there is Lucchesi. Enough, he said. The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, true, I replied. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. Now, verbal irony, once again. When Montresor responds true, true to Fortunato's statement, the cough is a mere nothing, it will not kill me, I shall not die of a cough. And then Montresor replies, true, true. That's real verbal irony for you. Because obviously we know that Fortunato is not going to die of a cough, and Montresor knows this as well, of course. So his plan is to kill Fortunato. So he knows the method and the way that Fortunato is going to die, and it's certainly not going to be from a cough. So again, we have to look at this ironical language. On the surface, he's portraying this sort of care and concern for Fortunato's health, but on the inside, we know his sinister plan is in action here, and Fortunato's completely, clueless as to what's going on. So the more he does this, the more he gets Fortunato, deeper and deeper down into the catacombs. The likelihood that Fortunato is going to figure out what's going to happen before it's too late is almost zero. And here's why. And again, he gives him more to drink, right? So he gives him another bottle of wine to drink. And then Fortunato, he raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. I drink, he said, to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life. There again, verbal irony. Montresor says, I drink to your long life. But in reality, we know Fortunato's life is actually towards its, climax here, and is in the tail end of his life. He's not going to have a long life after tonight. So this is again, this whole twisted, sort of demonic, if you want to even use that term, means of inserting these knife wounds with this language into Fortunato along the way. And Montresor is taking pleasure in this. These vaults, he said, are extensive. The Montresors, I replied, were a great and numerous family. I forget your arms. A huge human foot d'or in a field of azure. The foot crushes a serpent, rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel. And the motto? Nemo me impune laceat. My Latin is not so good, but the general translation is, no one insults me with impunity. And that is a direct link back to the opening paragraph, where he talks about this insult. Good, he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the innermost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like a moss upon the vaults. We are below the river bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back, ere it is too late. Your cough." Again, what does he mean when he says before it's too late or ere it's too late? It's definitely too late for Fortunato. Okay, if he doesn't go back now, he's never going to go back out again. So this is all part of Montresor's game with the language here. We will go back before it's too late. It's already too late for Fortunato. If he doesn't go back now, he's never going to see the light of day again. "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upward with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him with surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood?" "How?" "You are not of the Masons?" "Yes, yes," I said. "Yes, yes." "You? Impossible. A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelier. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than flame. All right, let's pause here for a minute. Go back to the previous page. What in the world is going on here with all this Mason stuff? Well, in case you are not familiar with the story of the Freemasons, the Freemasons were, and are, even in existence today, a kind of secret society, a secret organization of stonemasons originally. And then it became more and more sort of what we call an esoteric organization. Only members can join if they're invited to join by other people who are also members of the Masons. So there's really a reference here to the Masons. It would be with a capital M. All right? This is what we call the Guild of the Masons, or the Freemasons as they became known. And as a matter of fact, there were a number of people, famous people, who were members of the Masons. And if you think about the origins of the United States of America, for instance, the group of people known as the Founding Fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and people, James Madison, people involved in the founding of America as, you know, we know of the country today, the United States Constitution and all of that, they were members of the Freemasons. And even today, if you look at the currency that we use in America, the dollar bill, for example, and other examples on other bills, there are signs and symbols of Freemasonry on the dollar bill. In particular, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid is a sign taken from Freemasonry. So this society has been around for centuries, of course, way before even the foundations of America. And in this case, in this story, Montresor and Fortunato are aware of this, and apparently Fortunato is a member of the Masons. So again, these Freemasons, they have power, they have authority. Usually they are members of the aristocracy as it became, you know, further and further down the road in the history of the Freemasons. So Fortunato is a Mason. And that would be with a capital M. So they have these secret signs and these secret, you know, handshakes and these sort of secret passwords or whatever. And this is the thing that Fortunato does when he drinks the bottle out of the bottle. He makes some kind of what is called a gesticulation with the bottle itself. And that is apparently one of these secret signs or secrets of the Freemasons to identify who is a Freemason and who is not by the way that they move this particular drinking motion. So when he says, you are not of the brotherhood, when Fortunato says, you are not of the brotherhood to Montresor, he's referring to the brotherhood of the Freemasons. But Montresor, again, using this verbal irony and this play on words now, he's talking about Masons with a small m. When Fortunato says, you are not of the Masons, he means the society of the Freemasons. But then Montresor says, yes, yes. I said, yes, yes. You? Impossible. A Mason? A Mason, I replied. So a Mason with a small m refers to people who build stone walls with cement and stone, of course, or who create things with bricks and, currently in the modern day they do walkways and this kind of thing in people's houses. But in the old days, the Freemasons would build buildings out of stone, of course, and stone walls. So what is the sign of the Mason, small m, is the trowel, right? The trowel is the tool which they use to scoop up the cement, put it down on the stone, and then put the brick on top. So Fortunato thinks it's a real joke when, Montresor pulls this trowel out from under his cloak. So we have to ask ourselves, what is going on here? This guy, Montresor, he's walking around with this trowel inside his coat just for the case, in case that Fortunato happens to mention the Masons, he can pull this trowel out and show him, oh, I'm a real Mason, right? So this is, sort of a ridiculous exchange here. But again, it goes back to the point that Montresor is really enjoying pulling the wool over Fortunato's eyes here. And Fortunato thinks it's a great joke. But then they go through, and at last they come down to the very bottom of the vault here, where it says, at the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. We looked at those pictures yesterday. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi, he is an ignoramus, interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Place your hand, I said, over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No, then I must positively leave you. But first, I must render you all the little attentions in my power. The Amontillado! Ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I said. The Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. So, we're going to pause here for now, and just a final word about this part of the story. So in this part of the story, we really have to focus on Montresor's use of language and how it's really operating on 2 different levels. The surface level and then the below the surface level, right? The deeper level. So the surface level meaning we can get, and that's what Fortunato hears, is the surface level meaning. So he's interpreting things in one way, which is again part of Montresor's plan to make sure that he can give nothing away. But at the same time, Montresor has this deeper understanding, and so do we as the readers, have this deeper understanding of Montresor's true feelings, true intentions, and true sentiments regarding Fortunato's case. So he's out for revenge, he's out for retribution. But in the sense of carrying out his plan, he's starting to get sort of carried away, in a sense, with his own ingenuity. And he's, literally dropping these clues and hints everywhere he goes. And this one with the trowel, which he pulls out of his cloak, is really the, over-the-top piece de resistance, as they say. So he's really over the top here. So we have to, again, question Montresor's sanity. So obviously, he did suffer some kind of insult at the hands of Fortunato. Whether or not he blames Fortunato for his lack of happiness in his current state, we don't know for sure, but that's a strong indication that that might be the case. So he's definitely been wronged in some way. At least in his mind, he feels he's been wronged. And he puts all of that, transfers all of that anger and all of that pain and all of that hateful feeling onto Fortunato. So Fortunato becomes the target of his revenge for whatever reason. So that is his intention. So in the one sense, he's sane in the sense that he can reason these things out, and then he makes this carefully calculated, cold and calculating plan to dispatch Fortunato. And the main part of his plan is, obviously, he doesn't want to get caught for it, so he has to take every precaution possible to prevent him from being associated with this disappearance. And he does that. So would a person who is insane be able to keep himself composed in the way that Montresor keeps himself composed as he's carrying out his plan? Maybe yes, maybe no. But Montresor is definitely taking some kind of sadistic pleasure in this whole carrying out of his plan. So in the last segment of the story, which we're going to look at in the next episode of this series, we're going to focus not just on Montresor, but more particularly on Fortunato and his reality, how reality sets in on him and his realization that it's now the end for him. All right? So we're going to talk about that in the next episode and wrap up the story. So thank you all for watching, and hope to see you again very soon.